Hello, my name is Ryden Pipkins. I'm here with SunkamoSports.com, and today we're going over a lesson on how to crush your opponent in 10 moves. So, the first thing you want to do is start out with 1e4. Why e4 and not a different move like d4? E4 is the best move for trying to attack your opponents early on because it opens up both the bishop on c4 and the opens up both the bishop and the queen. And most likely, hopefully, your opponent will respond with pawn e5, and then we can get the most common positions. But yeah. So if you're going to do e4, e5, then why not play the scholar's attack? The scholar's mate was actually the first, my first opening that I learned in chess. And hopefully, the idea is to play bishop c4 and queen h5, and then Black realizes that they meant to play knight f6 and didn't, and then they play it, and Black is checkmated, and White wins, so that's good. The problem is, a lot of people, after getting mated in it once, they learn to defend it or play a different opening. Precisely g6, and we can't take this pawn because it's defended by the knight. So we go back, renewing the threat of mate in one. Now Black can play knight f6, and Black will have a perfectly fine position here. Be able to castle, and White doesn't really have an attack. So instead, we still play bishop c4, and we can still play queen h5 in some lines, but later on, not immediately. So what's very important and valuable is bring this queen up to the d1 to h5 diagonal to threaten man on a7, but just not immediately. But it'll prove to be very valuable. That will show you the most ideal setup is we're going to go over a lot with the King's Gambit here. So with e4, e5, and f4, a lot of these openings, a lot of these wins I'll show you will be in the King's Gambit, where it allows you to get this early attack with the bishop and queen. The ideal setup would be something like this, where White is already threatening to checkmate on f7. The bishop is out. Sometimes the knight hasn't reached c3, other times it has. But the main idea is the bishop on c4, the queen on h5. And this f-file being able to be this f-file being open for a rook later on. Right now, Black played something that's not so common, and they took on g1, but it's no concern to White because White can still play moves like these and then castle their king long, and everything will be fine, and Black will still be in trouble. My idea with queen h5 was to threaten mate 1, and knowing black is going to play g6, and then I'd be able to play queen f3. Most likely, black would play something like knight f6, and I could play d3 here. And long term, I have ideas. Long term, I have the advantage of d squared not being properly defended because the dark squared bishop is gone, and I still have a dark squared bishop. So I have long term attacking chances in this position. So this person kind of fell for the scholar's mate, but it was on move 7 or move 8 or 9 and not on move 4, but it's still the same kind of scheme. So the next game, and all of these are showing quick knockouts. I'll go back to the other game for 1 second. Against strong opponents, basically. Just to show if I can do them against my opponents, which have been playing chess for a while and are high rated, at least like amongst the top 10 or top 20% of the players on the site, then you can do them at your rating too. So this player is rated 1700. And I still was able to checkmate them in 7 moves. Okay, next game. This player was rated 1900, which is basically amongst the top 5% of players on League Chess. Or 10, I'm not sure. A pretty strong player. Played 93. Okay, so they didn't play knight c6. Not to worry, we can still have the same ideas of bishop c4, and we can bring our queen out later. We can still start an attack early. I did that this time before. Okay, so my bishop didn't go to the normal square that it'll go in most of these games, because it's actually more problematic for black here to have to make some sort of concession. They have to play bishop c7, and then my bishop can go to c4, or they have to play c6, which then weakens the d6 pawn. They play bishop d7. Now I can play bishop c4, and fast forward a few moves. Notice how a lot of my pieces are active. As soon as this bishop moves out, my my rooks can get into play very soon. Black's pieces, this piece is very passive. This piece is also very passive. Their king still in the center is going to take them 2 to 3 more moves to castle. And this is where we can take advantage of the position and attack them early on. Which I do now on move 13 by playing f4. Where there's no immediate threat, there's no immediate attack here, but I'm ahead in development. I'm controlling the center, so my idea right now is to force black's pieces on the squares that they don't want to be on, or squares that are weird for them. I did that by playing f4. They wanted to follow the principle of most valuable threats. So I attacked their knight. They counterattack by attacking my queen, but here's actually a blunder. Because they aren't so well developed, I can play a very spectacular and surprising move of bishop take f7 first, and then there's still two pieces. There's still two pieces hanging, basically. So king took. Now I ignore the attack on my queen, take with discovered check here. Another tactic. Materials equal. He won one piece, I won one piece, but we'll see how quickly we just completely take over the position. So I have to move the king, not a take. So now we got material, I'm already winning. Two rooks. Each side has one queen, each side has one bishop. I have this extra knight. But in addition to that, I also have more activity. All of Black's pieces are on their starting squares, and their king hasn't castled yet. So I'm ahead in material and piece activity, along with king safety. So it's basically game over for Black. I play queen h5 because it forces Black to baking session to play a move that they don't want to play. What I was thinking was they have to move their king because it's better than the other option. But once they move their king, they're never castling for the rest of the game. They're probably getting checkmated within the next 5 to 10 moves. Let's say they could play king d7, or they could play king d2, and it wouldn't end well. But g6 is equally as bad. This position is just not a good position to play. No one wants to play this position because white is superior in activity, and they resigned because they are losing this rook in the corner with check. So props to my opponent. Next game. They resigned in 10 moves. This one I thought was a bit premature, but it just goes to show what happens when you put pressure on your opponents and take advantage of the diagonal that I said before. Just fast forward a few moves. This is kind of theory. This is kind of just openings. They don't matter so much, but if you play the King's Gambit and you look up videos on YouTube and opening analysis, you'll see like the lines with h4 and stuff with g5 being played. It should not have been played by Black here for specific reasons, but the main thing to focus on is that I finally opened up the line for my queen to come to h5. Black does have to play knight e7, or the bishop should probably be here so they can play knight h6. Maybe. Not 100% sure. But I took that as an opportunity to force Black to either give up a pawn or be stuck, or have their king stuck in the center for a long time, or to no longer be able to castle by playing queen h5 check. In addition to that, if they don't block with the knight, let's say they play a move like king d7. Well, there's still 96. Or it's not 96 here. My bad. Because the king would be defending. But there's knight f7, forking the queen and the rook, which creates more problems. So they had to give up a pawn here, and they just resigned. Just to note, this wasn't even a blitz game. This was a rapid game, so they had time to think, and they still couldn't find a way to survive and to defend this position. And this is move 10. So like I said, how to crush your opponent in 10 moves. This game, 7 moves. This game, oh, wrong game. 10 moves. And the last one was 9 moves. So half of these games I won in 10 moves. Against pretty strong opponents that just were overwhelmed very early on. This is classical. So this is 30 minutes each side, so we have even more time to think now. So they played the Scandinavian. I still play the bishop c4. It's a little bit different. It depends on what black plays, but I still have opportunities to attack depending on what they play. Queen h5, e6. I develop my knight to f3 so I can castle soon, as soon as possible. Attack my bishop. But they can't do that because my queen was actually attacking there. So that was a little tricky. They were probably overwhelmed by my position because I got almost everything I wanted out of the opening. Or they just messed up. But if I'm playing in a more passive defensive setup, then I don't get the opportunity to win this fast. And the game takes longer, or they don't blunder like this, and maybe they're just not playing so well in the beginning, but then they start playing way better later on in the game. So it's very good, very recommended to win the game as soon as possible, especially classical. It's much better to win in the opening than to have to play out a 10-10 game an hour later, because that takes a lot of energy away from you for being able to play later on as well. So it's multiple things of why I believe, especially for beginners, especially just focus on winning in the opening. It's much more straightforward too. Just going for checkmate or going for winning material rather than the more advanced concepts, which we also have to apply in some of these games as well. And the game continues. I keep attacking. Right here, I'm already winning because of IC7. Sorry, not that one. IC7 and the fork where I win a rook. So by move 9, I'm already winning. Just by following the principles of playing e4, bring my bishop to c4, bring my queen to h5, and I'm ready to castle at any moment, which I actually did. of course, attacking, putting pressure on my opponent. I attacked the queen multiple times in this game, which is why the queen moved from d5 to then d7, and I was on e7. All right, so double check here. So they have to move the king again. This is just to win a pawn, but also, yeah, mainly to win a pawn, not really to repeat the position here. Knight c7. Now I take, it's a discovered check. So I want a pawn and I want a rook. And they have to block the check. They can't take this piece yet. They play b6. And here, I played a very strong move, which, in fact, may or may not be the best move. But I'm still winning. It's just not the best move for the position because they can trade everything off. They can trade everything off. I'm not sure. Or they can win the material back. They can win some of the material back, basically. But I should still be winning. So, seeing that the king is weak here and stuck in the center, I calculated and saw if they take, this is only a few moves, so this isn't anything crazy. But it takes a lot to see this in a game sometimes. If they take on a5, which sounds crazy to let them do that, I have this check, forcing move. They only have one square to move to. And then if I bring the knight to c7, it's checkmate. All right, so any other forcing moves to have? Well, if this comes with check and then they take on a5, that's not good. So I always thought to calculate that too. If they take on e5, I would take back this way and play bishop d5. Everything would be defended, and I would still be up in exchange. I'd have two rooks. I would have two rooks, three minor pieces. They would have two rooks. They would have one rook and three minor pieces. So I'd still be up a piece, I think. No, I'm sorry. I'd have, yes. Yeah, it's hard to keep track of how much material you win sometimes. But yeah, I would be winning after this. But they didn't, and instead I got to play a really nice mating pattern. I had knight c6 and knight c7 checkmate. So not only did I get to win this game, I got to save myself about 40 minutes of having to play a classical game, which it means a lot, against a pretty strong opponent. Let's see. And I got to sack the queen and checkmate them before move 20. So that's a highlight. Okay, this game. Now we're back to Rapid. It says Rapid Shield Arena here. Started with knight f3. And this game is supposed to show how even a quiet position or a boring position can be decided very quickly, or you can still knock out your opponent very quickly, even in a position that seems quiet. Where they played the Petrov, which is known to be very drawn, to be very drawish opening. I will note, if you look at the theory, they played the wrong moves. This move, this what's it called? This knight take e4 move is a mistake, and it loses exactly one pawn. In a blitz game, you can play it because there's a trap that's not very well known. I'm not sure if Eric Rosen, the international master, invented it, but he definitely went over it in his videos. But knight take e4 is a mistake. What you should do here is I'll have to go to like analysis so I can show moves. What you should do here is play d6. I believe queen e7 also works, but what I always do when I play the Petrov, and I play the Petrov a lot, is to play d6, then knight goes back to f3, then you can take on e4, then they can choose whether to play queen e2 or d3 or d4, and black's perfectly fine here. Which is the problem that a lot of people hate about the Petrov, is that it's very solid, and if you want to, there's very little there's very little imbalances and dynamicness to the Petrov. But they played 94, so I get to take advantage of that mistake. I play f4 to defend the pawns, perfectly fine, because queen h4 was never a threat. If they play queen h4, I'll show you. I have g3, and my bishop wants to come to this diagonal anyway. He's helping me develop potentially castle short, and he's just giving himself an extra tempo. He's just giving me an extra tempo. Sometimes f4 is not a good move. Sometimes f3 is not a good move. Playing f4 early on in the opening, especially when it's not on the second move, you always have to consider the risks about it. Okay. So I didn't take back immediately. I played 95. I took back. Now, if he takes with the queen here, he loses the rook on c7. So then he goes back to defend it. That was a tactic in and of itself. If he does like, I believe he might be able to take with the knight. What? Sorry. If he takes with the knight, it's pinned to the king, and I can also play bishop f4 and pinning that knight to the queen as well. So that's probably why they didn't take with the knight. Okay, so they played queen d7, played bishop c4 again, which can later, if threatens knight c7, or whenever my knight moves, this bishop's going to be very powerful in controlling this diagonal. It also defends the knight, so my queen can move through other squares. And of course, prepares castling, which is definitely what you want to do in this situation. As soon as you can castle and get this rook to that file, it's really strong. It's almost game over for black, basically. Which is why they played bishop c5, preventing castling. Attack the queen. Bishop f4, can't take. Knight takes c7, and bishop g5, I win the queen. But the cherry on top, after that, I can take the queen. They took back, and it's checkmate. And that was in 18 moves.